Thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of the NC Chambers podcast, Relaunching North Carolina, Perspectives from NC Business Leaders. The goal of this series is to make sure we're capturing and amplifying the voice of the business community as we move forward with reopening our state's economy and getting folks back to work. Today, we're honored to have with us Donald Thompson, CEO of Walk West, a digital marketing firm recently recognized by Inc. as the fastest growing agency in North Carolina for 2018 and 2019. He's also founder of the Diversity Movement. With 2 decades of experience leading firms, Donald is a thought leader on goal achievement, influencing company culture, and driving exponential growth. In addition, he serves on boards for several organizations in the fields of technology, marketing, sports and entertainment, and is a mentor for Google for the Entrepreneurs Exchange. A member of the National Speakers Association, Donald speaks frequently for businesses, organizations, and universities. He's also written for multiple publications, including Entrepreneur.com and CNBC.com, and has published his own ebooks on decision-making and diversity. To learn more, you can visit DonaldThompson.com and www.thediversitymovement.com. Donald, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Awesome. The first thing I'd like to ask you about is your ties to the North Carolina business community. I would love to just hear you explain in your own words what the connection is there.
So, son of a football coach, so I moved around a lot in my early years, but went to high school in Greenville, North Carolina, J.H. Rose, and then spent a little time at ECU. And then in the early 90s, moved to Raleigh and bounced around a couple different jobs, but landed my first technology sales role with a small software company called iCubed in 1996. And that really continued and grew the love affair I had with the Triangle, because I was able to grow a career, grow a family, and a lot of great friends right in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina area. And so big fan of the area and all the opportunity that it provides.
Yeah, I loved hearing your phrase love affair with the Triangle, because I'm right there with you. This is definitely a hot spot for in-migration right now, and I don't imagine ever living anywhere else. So definitely agree with you there. Just to dive into the full focus here of our podcast today, if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear you talk about how COVID-19 has impacted you personally before we get to the business side of things.
Yeah, so personally, like most of us, this has been a pretty, seismic or transformational or whatever big word you can use, change in the way we work and live our life. It came seemingly out of nowhere, and it has changed in terms of restricting, obviously, the face-to-face and the meeting conversations, but also from a lifestyle standpoint. When you're used to having the freedoms that we all tend to take for granted, and then they're taken away, there's an emotional toll to it also, because you are restricted to home more. You do have different rules for safety. And quite frankly, you're also suffering from the angst of either your business being impacted or friends and family having their livelihoods impacted. So there's a lot going on with COVID from a personal level. Very fortunate and blessed to be very healthy. I've not had any impact from the disease personally.
Great.
And really fortunate of that for most of our immediate family.
Yeah. You're involved in so many things here, not just in the Triangle, but throughout the state in your role. You're a writer, you're a leader for Walk West and also its diversity initiatives. And you participate in so many meetings where you are a moderator, and, you're just kind of a jack of all trades. So I know you have experience and contact with all sorts of business leaders throughout North Carolina. And I would love to hear, what conversations you've had with other business leaders and what they're saying about the situation and how it's impacting them from a business perspective.
Yeah, there's a couple of different flavors to that. So when I talk to my small business owner friends, and maybe in the restaurant space or that own hotels and different things, they're going through some significant turmoil. Right, their businesses have shut down or slowed to really a crawl, and so a lot of them have had to pivot and really transition to maybe online ordering, different things like that. And then you have kind of more traditional, larger organizations that have the ability to allow their employees to work from home and can get most of their work done.
Mm-hmm.
So the financial ramifications are still there, but it's not a go out of business type issue. And that's where I hear more people talking about just the psychological and the emotional, the mental health impact of some of the changes, because people are dealing with kids being at home, people are dealing with illness, people are dealing with their businesses taking a hit, which means there's a lot of fear and uncertainty about layoffs and different things. So when I look at the spectrum as an investor, I'm seeing a lot of the investment opportunities start to dry up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean the capital's gone away. It means it's big time on the sidelines.
Right.
Bigger enterprise clients, people are a little afraid of layoffs and different things. And then you throw in, an election year, the racial dynamics, all of that with COVID. And now all of a sudden you've got a pretty significant set of mind-numbing issues, if you will.
Definitely. I think you're so right when you talk about the far-reaching ramifications of this, not just on people's physical health, but the mental health as well, and also the economic health of our state as a whole, with the sidelines of investments, like you said. So a lot of potential for negativity, I think. But I think there are also, like you said, there's a lot of pivoting going on, and a lot of businesses are finding really creative ways to recater to their customers in different ways. So possibly a silver lining there for sure. Is there anything that you'd like to see change in our state's response to COVID-19?
Yeah, I'll add a comment to the
Sure.
right? Because yes, there's a lot of things that are not going amazing, but I've also seen a lot of people in a lot of communities rally together, right?
Yes.
And one of the things in terms of COVID is it is disproportionately affecting people of color in a negative way. And that's just by numbers. And I'm very, very fortunate to work with some of the leaders at Vidant Healthcare. And I'm really seeing them dig in Eastern North Carolina, both from an educational standpoint and outreach standpoint, to really target communities that we would call low trust communities. And how do we get this education about COVID? How do we get more support so that people can rise above the current circumstance the best that they can?
Yes.
That means everybody's got to work together. And so I'm very, very pleased with some of the enterprise support that I'm seeing across North Carolina. And that gives you hope that we can come together better as a community over time. And then also I am seeing the businesses pivot and be more creative. And that's not a bad thing in terms of finding new ways to share information, whether it's this podcast or whether it's videos that are created with their constituents so that you can survive and thrive in kind of this new economy. In terms of what can be done better, usually I have a lot of answers and a lot of things to say. The answer is the wrong thing. Usually I have a lot of perspectives, but I got to tell you, for those in government and in leadership, this is a terrible set of cards.
I
right?
cannot even imagine. I really can't.
No matter what you do, right? 50% of the people are screaming at you, writing nasty emails and on social media. Like take, for example, and I'll inch into this briefly, right? But it's, I'm a pretty candid person, right?
Yeah.
We were supposed to have the Republican National Convention in our state, right?
Yep.
So if, there was all kinds of communication back and forth from Washington about what we should do here in North Carolina, whether we should have it or not. And you can be a Democrat or Republican, but man, I wouldn't want to be Governor Cooper dealing with that kind of situation. It was a no-win situation.
Yeah.
Now, in the end, I believe personally that nobody really wanted that event in our state. I think if you just put all of the politics aside, the health risks were so dramatically clear, right? But we still created this partisan environment. So what could our state do better? Has nothing to do with our government or businesses. How does it do with us as individuals, what we could do better?
Right.
Maybe take a step back from all the over-the-top rhetoric and let's wear masks, wash our hands, and distance. And then try to have reasonable conversations about solutions where nobody has the answers. I'd love it if we could do some of that, right? And I think that our power as a state is the welcoming nature of North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
The power of our state is our education and our university systems. The power of our state is the multicultural impact of our state. Let's try to use those things to have a few more constructive conversations about how we push through this thing together. And maybe take just a little, we got an election coming, let's save all our political energy for that. And on the COVID piece, why don't we like figure out how to stay safe, have less people die, less people contract it, and like let's just maybe consider, right, having data that we push out that is bipartisan, but we're just really looking at the information available the best that we can. And I think if we could rise above some of the pettiness, I think maybe we could push through this thing a little bit stronger, faster. We're going to get through it, but there's a difference between crawling over the finish line, exhausted and barely getting over, versus pushing through it with momentum for the bright future we can have together.
I agree with you, Donald. I think, and you're not the first person to say this has been, overly politicized, and there's almost been a lack of focus on data and more of a focus on rhetoric, just like you said. And I think that ultimately that only hamstrings us. So I think that's a fantastic point. And I also want to go back and just acknowledge the point you made earlier about minority communities and how they're being impacted by COVID. That's something that has not been mentioned yet in any of our podcasts. And, you go through the media and you look at newspapers and, online websites, and you see it sometimes superficially mentioned. But I think it's definitely something that deserves a much harder look. And on a personal note, that's something that, after our conversation, I'd love to go and read more about. But thank you for making that point, because it hasn't been made yet at any of our podcasts. And I think it is absolutely critically important to the overall health of our state. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. We mentioned earlier, and people have heard in your bio, that you have extensive business experience. I mean, you are just a leader in so many different arenas here in North Carolina. So what words of advice could you share with other business leaders who are really struggling right now and just don't know how to navigate the level of uncertainty that's been thrown their way?
Yeah, so advice and perspective would be the right term, right? Because nobody really has answers.
Yeah.
I think that, and I appreciate the question. One thing is that chaos is an opportunity to innovate.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have to let go of our pre-COVID strategic plans,
mm-hmm.
because they're no longer relevant. And when you let go of the past and say, I need to take a blank sheet of paper, and reestablish future goals, reestablish purpose and mission for the business and the resources required to get there, it'll be amazing what kind of new ideas and innovations you can come up with. The second thing that I would say is lean on new sources of information and insight and connections, because most of the business people that I talk to on a regular basis are very open to supporting other entrepreneurs in this moment, because we're all feeling this pain of uncertainty.
Right.
And a lot of times you're 15 minutes away from a powerful idea based on who you network with.
I love that.
Right? In terms of the sphere of influence that people have. And so I'll give an example, and not name drop, but I was on a call with a very successful business person here locally about 20 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that he had a very, very sincere interest in D&I.
Yeah.
We both knew each other casually, but we came together kind of accidentally. And the timing couldn't have been better. And he shared with me 2 or 3 nuggets of other people I should talk to that are going to accelerate my business in a very, very significant way.
That's great.
So what I would encourage entrepreneurs to do is increase your networking, even though it can't be face-to-face, even though it's a phone call, even though it's an email, even though it's a Zoom call, right? Because that is going to give you that future forward looking from somebody else's perspective other than yours, because even the most positive of us are a little bit less optimistic than we once were months ago. So we desperately, and I use the word desperately, need the support of other dream chasers to help sharpen and push our thinking to the next level. And so that's one of the things that I would really, really lean on, because if 2 people come together, there's usually a third rail of innovation that comes from that.
Fantastic, concrete advice that I'm hoping our audience heeds. That is top notch. Thank you for that. Along the same lines, you lead an organization, but I'm sure you're also a mentor to others who are leaders of their respective organizations. For businesses where employee morale might be really low, some industries have been hit much harder than others. How would you advise them to rally their troops and keep morale as high as it can be during a time like this?
Yeah, we're dealing with this at Walk West and some of the companies that I'm on the board of across the board, and everybody is dealing with morale issues. And some of it is because the company's not doing well. Some of it is because the stay at home is not amazing for people. All the different reasons we talked about. A couple things that you can do. Number one, transparency is key, right? You got to let people know where the business is, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
Right? Be as open as you can be. If you got to make tough decisions, which many of us have to do, be as gracious as you can be, right? Be as open as you can be in terms of the timing with that individual or individuals. The other thing is you have to create that sense of unity around a common goal, mission, and enemy. And the enemy is not letting COVID, not letting this pandemic, not letting these racial tensions, not letting the recession keep us from dreaming for our company. You got to give people very specific things they can do to be a part of the change that your company needs. And when you do those couple of things, what you can do is you can change that negative energy to more of a positive outcome, because it's hard to be negative while you're actively pursuing a positive goal. It's easy to be negative if you're sitting still.
Right.
But when you're actively pursuing a positive goal, it gives you the best chance out there to keep your attitude as good as it can be in these moments. And then encourage people to stop watching the news as much. You can't, not no news, but most of it is either overblown or under communicated, right?
Right.
Where, our history recently has been hoax or the sky is falling, right? No real moderated in between. And so I would encourage people to minimize some of the sporadic information sources.
Yes.
Focus on what we can do in the moment to push through together and stay safe, but also create an economic value that we all need to grow and live and thrive.
I love that. You make such a great point about staying in motion. I mean, the power of inertia, right? If we're working towards change, then there's not really a lot of time to sit around and focus on the negative. I love that. What's encouraged you most during this pandemic? Maybe encouraged isn't the right word, but what's the silver lining here? We sort of talked about it briefly earlier, but just expand on that.
One of the things that's been really encouraging, and we're very fortunate at Walk West, and also as the founder of the diversity movement, in that our business, it's probably 10 to 15 times as hard to win new business now, but we're able to win some new business, right? So we're in that fortunate group that we're still able to swing every day to try to win. I've been very pleased with the people within our organizations and how people have stepped up to try to do more, have managed and battled through some of the things people are going through personally and professionally as we push through, is number one. And then number two, I would say that I'm very, very optimistic about the number of business leaders that I'm talking to that want to lean in to make the world a more equitable place for everyone. And there's a lot of people that are trying to win the PR battle around D&I, and that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But the leaders that I'm talking to are very specific in their asks about what they can do to be leaders for their organization. And those conversations are encouraging me in a moment to where things look a little bit chaotic. Yeah. But at the end of the day, leaders don't always have the loudest public voice.
Correct.
But they're typically the most powerful behind the scene, action-oriented people. And a lot of those folks I'm talking to are figuring out very specific ways to both take care of their employees during the pandemic and also be a beacon of hope for some of the racial strife we're dealing with in our country.
That is so encouraging to hear. I'm glad you shared that because, we've talked about this already. This pandemic has made so many people feel more isolated than ever. But, the example you just shared gives us hope that right now there's a lot of inertia. There's a lot of action towards bringing us closer together in ways that we might not have had before. So that is absolutely encouraging. A lot of businesses, some businesses are insulated from COVID-19, but most of them aren't. For those who are experiencing a fall in revenue, a fall in profits, but still want to focus on employees above the financials, what are ways that they can make their employees, their customers, people in general, a priority during this time?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like to use examples. So one of our team members at Walk West had a margarita meeting. So about 5 o'clock one night.
Where was my invitation,
Yeah,
Donald?
exactly. I'll catch you next one. We, a small group of us got together. We all had like homemade margaritas or a glass of wine, and threw the Zoom cast up and just talked about everything except work.
Yeah.
For about 40 minutes. And it was simple. It was fun. It was engaging as best it could be.
Right.
But I think there's small, low cost, high impact things that people can do. That was one example. I was on a call with another company, and really, it was a pretty large call. It was 1,400 people on this call, and they were doing a D&I listening session that we were part of. And just hear the feedback and the comment from the employee base that they were just thankful that their CEO gave them space to share. Some people think that you have to have a perfect answer to help people move through a moment, but sometimes people just need to be listened to and know that you care.
Right.
And demonstrating that, whether it's on the D&I side, whether it's on kind of the mental health side. Another thing that we did is we worked with our HR, we worked with our healthcare providers to provide a really solid list of references for people that might need to have a mental health conversation that they haven't had before, that are dealing with some things that they just don't understand how to process. That didn't cost us a tremendous amount of money to make those resources more known and promoted, right? It didn't cost us enough to have a margarita meeting, right? It didn't cost a lot for this corporation to have a Zoom session on some of the racial strife that's going on and not try to solve it, not try to make any kind of specific statement, but say, hey, listen, I want to give people in our organization some space to share and talk. And I think those kind of outreaches are really important in the moment. And then the other thing is where there is investment required, right? Everybody's in this pandemic together. So there's a lot of vendors and organizations that have virtual services that used to be live.
Sure.
That you can get done in a more cost-effective way than you ever could before, because everybody's hunting a little bit of business when they used to be comfortable with a lot, and people are more flexible.
I love that. Are there any final words that you'd like to leave our audience with before we close things up today? You've given so much concrete advice that I know our audience will appreciate, but any final thoughts from you?
I think our responsibilities as business leaders, both in our companies, our communities, is to continue to be better than we were yesterday. And that is both as leaders of our organization, specifically in the business industry domain that you're in, and then as individuals in terms of our community outreach and how we create and extend the values of our company in the community that we serve and work in. And I think that most people I would encourage to not try to hit the home run on any of these issues, but there's nothing wrong with crawl, walk, run, as long as we're moving forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Donald Thompson, CEO of Walk West and founder of the Diversity Movement. Donald, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
I really appreciate it. I had a great time, and thanks for having me.
Thank you.